Sentience is the capacity to feel something, to have experiences. You could say it means that there's something, what it's like to be that organism, in the way that I think there's nothing that it's like to be a rock or a tree, but there is something that it's like to be you and me, and there's something that it's like to be a cow or a pig or a dog. So that's what I understand by sentience, and at the most basic level, it's the capacity to feel pain or to feel pleasure. Utilitarianism is the ethical view that the right act is the one that will have the best consequences. So of all of the choices we have, we should look to do what will have the best consequences, all things considered, best consequences for everyone affected by that act. And typically utilitarians mean by best consequences, they mean the ones that will do the most to promote happiness rather than misery, or pleasure rather than pain, or just welfare, well-being over a less satisfactory life. Utilitarians were perhaps the first to come out strongly in favour of the idea that animals are included within the sphere of ethics. So if you look at earlier ethics, at least within the Western tradition, of course, then you find that there are traditions from Aristotle and from the Christian traditions and from Kant that tend to either give animals no place within ethics or push them to the very outermost margins. Whereas utilitarians said, look, pain is a bad thing. It's a bad thing when we are in pain, it's a bad thing when other humans are in pain, and it's a bad thing when animals are in pain. So utilitarianism took up the interests of animals in a very central way and has consistently stuck with it ever since the late 18th century. I think that we ought to focus on trying to change those areas where there is the greatest amount of animal suffering. And I believe that to be in animals that we are raising for food, for their meat or their eggs or their milk. Because just in terms of numbers, worldwide we have something like 65 billion animals, almost 10 times the population of the world, being raised and killed for food each year. So this is a vast number. I mean, it makes the number of animals used in experiments or in fur farms, or of course the number of abused dogs and cats, those numbers are all much, much smaller. And that's why when you consider that most of these animals are locked indoors in factory farms where they can't live natural lives or turn around or walk freely in some cases, then I think it's clear that there's much more suffering going on in farming, and particularly the mass industrial farming, than there is in any other area of animal well-being. There are many obstacles. I mean, one of them is that there are big commercial interests in exploiting animals and continuing to exploit animals, so they will resist change. Also, people are very much driven by habits, so if people have been in the habit of eating meat once or twice a day, then it's hard for them to break that habit. There are still some ideological positions that do not give animals their proper place, including some religious traditions. So I think that there are many different obstacles. This is a very far-reaching change that affects everything, and that's why, although I do believe we've made significant progress in the last 40 years, we haven't gone as far as we ought to. We should be making faster progress. Well, if I run a desert island, I would want to have something rather fat that I can spend a lot of time reading, and recent work of philosophy by the Oxford philosopher Derek Parfit called On What Matters is 2 very large volumes. I think it's a total of about 1,400 pages, and it's very densely argued. So even though I have read it and studied it, I'm sure that I could read it several times again, and each time I would take something more positive away from it. So if I'm allowed a 2-volume book, then I think that's the one I'll take.
All right. Okay. Thank you.